Jack just sort of brushed that aside. He said, well, he wanted someone not committed to an academic schedule, someone who could focus sharply on the project. The department needed a book in a year, not 6 or 7, he said. And to help me out with that timetable, he suggested a co-author so we could get the book done within 12 months. And the co-author was Robert Williams, who was a Russian historian at Washington University at St. Louis at the time. Weighing all my other job options, I took it. By late May, I had moved to Washington and was so certain I would go back. I signed a lease on an apartment for a year, and they said, would you, if you initial list, we'll extend it at a slighter rate increase the second year. I said, nope, I'm leaving after a year. First good business decision. So we began to research and write a history of the Department of Energy's response to 3 Mile Island, an event that was essentially ongoing. My former Williams colleagues were appalled. I was no longer a historian. To them, they called me, or they said, you're a presentist, with a sneer. Well, at least I was putting some bread on the table. And that's what changed nearly everything I learned about history in school. First of all, I learned to work in contemporary records. Contemporary records meant raw records. That meant they had never seen the guiding hand of an archivist. They were stacked on tables, pinned on corkboards, tossed in random boxes. There were charts, memos, photographs, handwritten notes, newspaper clippings, documents of all sorts jumbled together. Our solution about collecting them is we simply swept them off the tables into boxes out of the airport hangar in Middletown, Pennsylvania, and took them back to Washington and sorted them through. Please let me know when you get a chance to do that kind of record collection. The drill introduced me to the basics of archival processing and greatly increased my appreciation of the professionals who did it. Secondly, something else I hadn't learned in graduate school, I learned to work as a team. Nothing in my undergraduate or graduate training in history had introduced me to team research and writing. Yet there was no other way to get that work done. We hired a research assistant. We conducted a series of oral history interviews. We outlined the book as a team, wrote the chapters as a team, and did the editing as a team. A traditional academic approach to research and writing was an early casualty of 3 Mile Island. Third, I learned to do history in nuclear energy, a topic that had absolutely no relation whatsoever to my formal training or interests. I learned that I could learn something new again. In teaching, I had taught the same subjects over and over, only the students changed. In applied history, the subject topic changed with every project. I learned to be flexible, ready to adjust to changes in topics and client requirements, and to explore new areas in which history could prove useful and valuable. Another change was to electronic media. While we were drafting those chapters, I wrote them out first on foolscap, then typed them on a electric typewriter. How many remember the Selectrics? And then a visiting scholar at DOE, Rodney Carlisle, made the mistake of offering one time, I think I dragooned him in to what was then called key in the final manuscript. And this was on an Exxon-made computer called a Videc. Now, I hope none of you are familiar with that. This early word processor looked like an airplane cockpit and was just as complex to operate. It stored information on 8.5-inch floppy disks, and to make the job more challenging, you had to save every page or you lost it. So you had to press the key. Thoughtfully, the save key was placed right next to the delete key. A situation that neither improved Rodney's disposition nor his language as he keyed in the text. In the meantime, 3 other events occurred that would keep me in Washington. I did keep that apartment, and it did cost me more. The first was overhearing someone in the next room at the National Archives. This was Archives 1. This was not here then. Asking the archivist to do some research for him. When the archivist said that he could not do it, I went into the room and suggested that I could do it for the gentleman and handed the man a business card, which I had thoughtfully printed up about 6 weeks before. "Meet me at my hotel in the morning with a contract," he drawled in this great Texas accent. You'll forgive me, I'll get Pete up here to do it better. I had never written a contract, and I didn't even know how I'd do the work. But that evening I called Ruth Harris, an early member of the Society, who had been working on the foreign relations volumes at the State Department for David Trask, Roger's brother. She agreed to do the research, which was on the changing coastlines of land ownership off the San Padre Islands off the Texas coast. I drafted a letter contract, that's all I could think about, and took it to the hotel. The next morning, the deal was signed. The second was a new book project. With Rodney, we landed a contract to do a history for the Bartlesville Energy Technology Center in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And the third one was a contract to search government records relating to fallout from atmospheric weapons testing and make those records available to litigants on all sides of the case. Professional historians, the attorneys argued, could provide unbiased, disinterested research trusted by both plaintiffs and defendants. We didn't realize at the time, but we were on our way to making a business of history, of making Clio a company. In the fall of 1980, the TMI book was ready, and Dick Hewlett, who was retiring from DOE, Bob, Rodney, and I had sketched out broad outlines of a history company. We were not the first. That distinction belongs to Darlene Roth, who formed the history group in Atlanta some years before. But our idea was a bit different. It was to create a firm that could employ professional historians outside the academy and provide them not only with work, but office space and equipment, competitive salaries and benefits. In effect, similar conditions to federal history offices, but we hoped without the bureaucracy of universities or federal agencies. In addition, Dick insisted that the company's individuals keep professionally alive. He liked the society. He insisted that we keep active in it. He had long heard much unfounded criticism about court historians in response to his pioneering studies at the AEC. As Vicki Harden recently reminded me, being attacked for court history, or history for hire, was a knee-jerk negative response, largely emanating from the academic world, but not solely. Dick realized that for history associates to achieve credibility, we had to deliver the highest levels of professional integrity and work. While Dick's name on the masthead gave us some immediate credibility, it was more than a decade before our work became widely accepted. I recall a discussion about the 3 Mile Island book at the Center for Democratic Institutions in the early 80s in Santa Barbara. The first question I was asked was, "How can your history be accurate? You got paid to write it." I asked if the man had read the book. No, he said, and not in the least bit concerned with his omission or total lack of understanding about what was in the book, or, more importantly, the standards of professional history. Change takes time. Not until 1997 or 1998 did professional recognition come to a History Associates project, and that was a history of the Argonne National Laboratory, written by Jack Hall with Ruth Harris and Dick Hewlett, which won the Society's Henry Adams Prize. What we try to do is produce high-quality professional history on time and within budget. I'm proud to add that none of our publications has ever been accused of court history in any peer-reviewed journal. When we incorporated on January 2nd, 1981, we offered little beyond the traditional historical services of research, book writing, and drafting special reports. In that year, we had one major client, the Department of Energy. We continued the early work researching records relating to nuclear fallout and atmospheric weapons testing. We converted to computers. Our first was a DEC computer that cost nearly $10,000. I believe that today's smartphone carries more computing power than that early mini computer. Hewlett was even more advanced than we. He favored portable computers. In his case, a 17-pound-plus Chameleon, it was called, had a 4-inch screen and a box the size of a carry-on bag. I called it his luggable. That was our view of the cutting edge of history. By the spring of '81, we boasted 3 full-time employees, and at the end of the first year, we had gross contract sales of, I'm glad you're all sitting down here, $130,000. For a number of years, we settled into the traditional mode of doing history. Research, though there was an important change. We did not choose topics as we'd done in graduate school. Now our clients determined what we worked on. It was refreshing and a bit exciting to realize that there were people who valued history, saw ways to use it, and were sophisticated enough to actually pay to have it done professionally. It came as a surprise. In the first years, we collected and declassified federal records relating to fallout, wrote a history of the Navy Federal Credit Union, completed an archives records project for the Family Liaison Action Group, or FLAG, if you remember, those were the families of the hostages in Iran, and drafted a corporate history for Texas Instruments.